What makes this team so special? And right there is your opportunity to inspire people by what you're going to say next. There was never a time that we had a weekend where I felt like, okay, we're in trouble. We're not going to be able to dig ourselves out of the hole here. And again, at that time, just the belief on all those players' faces. I said to the captain, play north first towards Paarl Gymnasium, south the second half, because we're going to score the winning try in front of our home crowd. And he sort of like looked at me and like, are you serious? And I said, yes, we're going to do this today. It's going to be tough, but we're going to get stuck in. Okay, we made a mistake. This is what it is now. There's nothing we can do about it now except for trust the process. I think that belief with action in training, in preparation, and it happening then in a game sort of created that character within the team. You're going to inspire them and do something in their lives. And I think that's what I want to be. The second thing is I want to make young men better men, because we all need those men.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode on the Coach G Show. Today's episode is a special one for me. I'm sitting down with Sean Erasmus, first team rugby coach at Paarl Boys High, my former school, my alma mater, where my own rugby journey really began. Sean is one of the most respected coaches in South African schoolboy rugby. He's coached in the highest school level, worked in professional environments, and helped shape countless young players on their path through the game. In this conversation, we go deep into the realities of modern schoolboy rugby in South Africa, the pressures young players face, the mindset of the new generation, the pathways to professional rugby, and why so many players are leaving the country after school. We also unpack Boys High's culture, into schools, the three traditions which drives every single player and person working at that school, and the lessons behind Sean's unbeaten run from 2015 to 2017. If you're a young rugby player, a parent, or a coach trying to understand what it really takes to develop in South African rugby today, this episode is for you. Sean, how are you doing? Great to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much.
Now, really looking forward to a chat. Did you enjoy your holiday?
Yes, very much. Sunny and hot. So I got a good tan. Spent some good time in the water, in the ocean. So it's always good to just switch off a little bit before the season starts again.
It's awesome. I think a lot of people don't realize, being a full-time high school rugby coach in South Africa is not just a teacher just coming in, coaching a few boys. Rugby has completely changed. And if I'm not mistaken, schoolboy rugby in South Africa, you can call it semi-professional.
Definitely. I think we literally have in total throughout the whole year, maybe a month sort of off season where there's no commitment and giving the boys an opportunity to do something else. The rest of it is spent on off season and pre-season and preparation for the next year. So, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Sean, I just watched the highlights again this morning of last year's inter-schools, and maybe to give some context to the audience that is watching or listening to this podcast, inter-schools is a massive derby match between Paarl Boys High and Paarl Gymnasium, two schools that have produced some amazing Springboks. If you look at Paarl Boys High, you got Corne Krige, Frans Mulherber, Carl Du Plessis, so many great players, Thomas du Toit.
And yourself?
Myself, Evan Roos, and Paarl Gym, that likes of Pieter Rousseau, Louis Kuhn, Jean de Villiers, Skalk Burger, just to mention a few as well. And, there's great history. And I remember back in my days as a youngster coming through the ranks, playing in front of 15,000 people, it was massive. And today, I think it has escalated to about 20,000 plus. And obviously seeing now that schoolboy rugby is being televised. But Sean, take us through last year. How did it feel winning into schools again?
Yeah, I must say it's amazing. We were really blessed as a team. Obviously, the year before, we were a bunch of grade 11s, a very young side. And we got a lesson in rugby the year before at inter-schools from Paarl Gym with that same team. And yeah, it was just amazing to see the growth of the team after that. You often sit back and then people say you learn a lot from losing, and as a coach, you sort of reflect on that, go like, I don't feel like I've learned anything. It hurts, and it's a painful sort of a journey. But yeah, we really did learn something after the year before, and then this year was just amazing to see the character of the boys and the fight. And like you say, which schoolboy does not want to play in front of 20,000 plus people? I don't think there's a lot of professional players that have that opportunity a lot of times.
Yeah, it's a mess. I just watched this morning again, and I'll be honest, the quality of rugby. So I was an academy coach in La Rochelle, and we were coaching under 21 players, and the level of play is it's unbelievable. I would almost say it's almost better than the quality of some of the academy teams here in France. It's just the ability to keep the ball alive, the quality of the structured play, and the way players are finding space, their tactical awareness. I'll be honest, I was impressed. It was, if you didn't take into consideration this was a schoolboy game and you were just not paying attention to the faces of the boys, seeing that they're still young, you're like, these are full-on rugby players. The way they are built, their conditioning, compared to the way we used to look back in the day. Look, we had one or two big boys, but we know we had baby fat and stuff. But like, these guys are like properly conditioned. But we're going to deep dive into that in terms of the way players are preparing for these big games and everything. But I think what is impressive, you guys were down with 9 minutes left, 33-21, and not just any rugby game. This is that people need to understand stakes are high. It's about, this is everything. This is the World Cup final, if we can put it there, in schoolboy rugby. That's how it feels for the two schools involved. When you lose, it almost feels like everything you have done the whole year was for nothing. Yeah. That's how it feels. Not that it's the case, but that's how it feels. You are representing a school. Yes. You're representing a community, people that have come before you. Now, that's impressive. And if you look at it, 12 points down. How did your boys come back?
Yeah, so I think, just to give context as well, literally, as you say, the feeling is you're representing the whole town, the whole community, because, the history of this game is the town is split in two. The game is played in the central of town, as you will well know, because you've been there. So you sort of, when you walk to that field in the first place in the morning, you're like, okay, you walk through town, everybody's queuing to get in. There's thousands of people standing on the side of the stadium. The players walk past there. You sort of feel that immediately. So, when you then go fast forward, like you say, to the last 9 to 7 minutes and we're sort of behind there, I must say it's something that we always anticipated as a team, that we are going to need 23 players to win this game. And if you look at how we did things last year, we rotated that bench, much to the frustration of a lot of people. We sort of, I think, learned from what we can do with our rolling subs. There's a law in South Africa that allows you to make 12 rolling subs at any time within the game. So we rotated players to keep them fresh and to keep the pressure on. And I know a lot of the boys were disappointed the week before when I announced the team. They were hoping that they would be in the starting 15, but I said to them, you're going to come on and you're going to make such a big difference. It's going to be important. And I think with that sort of 9 minutes, 7 minutes left, we had the whole bench on the field, and the tempo and that intensity, which we train at every single week, just started coming through. And the small contributions, defensively, with our attack, everything, it just came together in those 7 minutes. Wege van Zyl, our sixth flank, who's just this amazing kid, hard worker. When you walk in the morning in the gym, he's sort of the first guy that you walk into, just that quiet assassin warrior. He sort of got that first offload away and started everything, big turnovers, big tackles, and then you just sort of live from that momentum, and like I say, it's coming a year with these boys. There was never a time that we had a weekend where I felt like, okay, we're in trouble. We're not going to be able to dig ourselves out of the hole here. And again, in that time, just a belief on all those players' faces. There was never a time where I felt like, okay, we're in trouble here. Reino Rist, our conditioning coach, I sent him on and said to the guys, tell them we're going to score 3 tries. Before we started the game, I said to the captain, play north first towards Paarl Gymnasium, south the second half, because we're going to score the winning try in front of our home crowd. And he sort of looked at me and are you serious? And I said, yes, we're going to do this today. It's going to be tough, but we're going to get stuck in there. So I think the belief was always there, and that sort of talks to our team culture and who we are. But amazing. 3 tries in that last few minutes, something special.
It comes down to what I always say, belief drives behavior. Recently had on the podcast Basil Karsis, the S&C coach of the Bulls, And I remember he told the story of Heineke Meyer saying that now they're going to miss this kick. Don't worry, we're going to miss this kick. And Victor, we're going to win this game. All that hard work, it plays. But what interests me is that there's a lot of hype in the week, and I believe even today, even more than back in my day when I was in school in '99. There's a lot going on. There's the big brag. There's the events. There's a lot of hype. The first team is being put on a pedestal and put in the limelight. So how do you prepare players for this big moment? Maybe you'd have some of the grade 11s that have transitioned to grade 12 now that are kind of used to it. But how do you prepare players for this big moment? Because that's a lot of pressure to deal with at that age, 17 years old, some 16, 18 years old. How do you prepare your team for that big moment?
Yeah, so obviously we had Casper Olofsson this year as a mental toughness coach that worked a bit with the team as well. And I think we kept talking about the moments where it gets hard, like where do we go to our blue state, our clear state, our head space needs to be blue. And I remember the first session when he was here, we thought like, okay, yes, this is very different to what we used to. But the players sort of got into that groove really quickly to where it was like, okay, we made a mistake. This is what it is now. There's nothing we can do about it now except for trust the process, get back into system, like just keep working hard for each other. And somewhere it's going to come, it's sort of going to happen again. And I think that belief with action in training, in preparation, and it happening then in a game sort of created that character within the team, like, okay, we're always going to be able to do this. And I always say to people, like, Arthur, you're working with youngsters here. We all know what it's like to be scared. When you're scared of something, it's usually because you don't have all the information and you don't talk about it. And the worst thing with fears is when people go like, don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't worry. It's not going to happen and it's going to be okay and whatever. And just by saying that, you're addressing the immediate fear, but you're not dealing with the solution to that fear. So we always in the week spoke about what is it going to be like? What could happen? If that happens, what happens there? So I think in a lot of ways we sort of dealt with the fear theoretically and within our strategies in our game and how we planned and how we looked at everything. We spoke about the fear. We said, this could happen. We could be behind. Ivan could miss a kick. We could make mistakes. We spoke about all that stuff. And I think, for me personally as well, if there's something that's bothering me, I want to talk about it. And I want somebody to say like, this is how you can deal with it. Don't worry about it. But on top of that, don't worry about it. This is how you can deal with it. And this is how we're going to go forward with it. And I think especially working with youngsters, our big thing here with Boys High is, and my big philosophy is, you've got to work with a human being first. When you create good human beings and good people, the rugby brings them into the room, but naturally they become good at everything they do. So it's always about developing that character and working with the players. And that's why I think, like before every game, we have what we call family time. And it's a bit of Bible study. It's a bit of, like just getting everything up, because our three pillars are faith, family, and team and that's in that order. So we never move away from that. Wherever you are and whatever journey in your own life, that's okay, because those pillars are going to keep you safe and bring you back to where it is. And that's why I say, I never, somebody asked me yesterday, said like, yes, you must be nervous. I said, yes, everybody's nervous. With a big game, if you're not nervous, obviously there's something wrong, or you're just made of steel, which is not happening in this side at the moment. But, sort of you are nervous, but then you go back and you go like, I know, I look at the bench and I know there's 8 players good enough to come on and make a difference. And on the field, there's 15 guys that know exactly how to handle this. And I think, afterwards when we spoke about it as a team, the players were like calm all the time. They like, were you worried? And I said, no, I was never worried. I said, were you nervous? I said, yeah, I was nervous, but not because I didn't think you guys could do it. Just when you guys were going to do it. And they were like, it was so awesome on the field. We were in a blue state. We breathed through it. We reset. We sort of went back again. Okay, cool. So they've got the ball. We got to tackle it, turn it over. So it just kept going back to the principles of every section that we worked on through the whole year.
Oh, that's amazing, because what you're referencing there, what you guys worked through with the mental toughness coach, is on the principles based by Kerry Evans that worked with the All Blacks as well. the red brain and the blue brain. You
Yeah.
know, that's something which I use a lot as well, and I used it a lot with my academy team back in the day. You know, I explained to them, you know, if you go into the red state, you know, you it's anger, it's emotion. You no longer lose it. You know, and it is brilliant, and that's something which I share a lot as well. You know, in the method, it's about the step back, step up, and step back in method. You know, so if something happens, you know, instead of like going in this rabbit hole and feeling negative and self-doubt, you just assess what just happened, what is the solution, and let's go and execute. Wow, that's 100%. Unbelievable to see the amount of depth that you guys are going to at this level at school. And I think that's where it's so important that people realize that, you know, schoolboy rugby is no longer just schoolboy rugby. You know, it's completely different. I mean, let's maybe talk about that. You know, if you can maybe give insights to our audience that are in other countries as well. I know in New Zealand they're quite intense as well, and some schools in the UK. But tell me, what does that backroom staff look like at Paarl Boys High behind the first team?
Yeah, we've got an amazing coaching group, amazing management team that work with the boys. And, you know, that's very important because it's never just about one person. It's about a team of people. You know, it takes that village to raise a child, if you can say that, you know. And I think that's something we got right here with Paarl Boys as well, is that we've got really good people. I mean, George Earl was a professional rugby player. He's our forward coach. You know, he sort of works so well with the guys. I think he played in France as well. And
I coached him actually at Colomiers.
There we go. So there we go. Yeah, and he's such a good man, and he's got such a good work ethic, you know. So once again, the boys, the detail is always so good. You know, walkthroughs at break time, clips and preparation, everything is sort of like, when you look at it, and my time coaching Super Rugby at the Lions and my time at the Sharks, I think, like, people always ask me what's the difference. I go, like, I think just the age, because the coaching is the same, preparation is the same. And then we had David Sardi, that's an old boy at the school, so he understands everything. You know, he was sort of involved with that. And then Neil de Bruin, who's now moved on to the Bulls assistant coach, he was doing the attack for us. Anzel, our physio, Anzel Brink, Reiner Rist, our conditioning coach, Kobus Ace, Barnu Pieterse, all our medical staff, they're all top surgeons, top people.
Wow.
You know, so at any time when there's an injury or anything like that, that youngster gets looked at immediately. And there's a follow-up, and then there's a rehab and a prehab. So, you know, Vickers Kruger is our manager. You know, somebody just, you don't have to worry. You just sort of look back and he's got it all under control. So, you know, so our staff is, we're probably about a management team of 10 people.
Wow.
That look after two teams. Our first and second team is together, under 19, under an A and B team are together. And yeah, you know, so you've just got this amazing group of people that constantly work with the guys. And then, I mean, Janru van die Kerk, who you know, played SAA prop. He sort of worked with our scrums, and obviously that was a big piece of how good we were this year. You know, I know they used to refer to him as a ship in the harbor. You know, he didn't go anywhere, you know, when he used to play as a prop. And I think he sort of, you know, resonated with the boys so well when he coached them as well. So yeah, so we really have a professional group of people that look after these boys. And I think it's important, you know, they're like, if you want to become something, why not start earlier at it? And why not have the opportunity to start something earlier? You know, my son is finished with school now, and I think a lot of times, like, I'd love for him to start early in what he wants to do with life, because he's going to get so much practice behind it. So, you know, back to our management team, I think that's what they do extremely well is, you know, Reiner Rist, our conditioning coach, when I look at him work with the boys, and I look at, like you said, you know, I mean, when I was at school, we had a bench press and a couple of free weights, and that was sort of like, nobody really knew how to use it, you know, like, you saw videos or you watched something on TV, you never knew how to. Now when I walk out my office here into the gym, and I look at how the boys are being trained and how they are moving heavy weights at power and at speed, you sort of understand why the collisions are so big and why these guys are so amazingly strong. And even now during the holiday, the guys are sending on our group videos of training, and they're disciplined because they want that opportunity. So yes, massive management team that does really well strategically and theoretically well with the boys, but also on the pastoral side of things, always somebody that you can walk in and close the door and go like, hey, coach, I'm struggling with this, or like, how do I do this? And that's probably the most important part for me, is when I talk to the coaches, is like, rugby brings these guys to us. What we leave them with is who they will be one day as fathers and as husbands and men in other people's lives. So, and that's what I love to see is how George has a one-on-one with one of the props or the locks and explains their mistakes, and sort of like in an environment where the player is not feeling like, jeepers, this guy's on my case all the time and putting me under pressure, but rather in a thing called, sit down, be coachable, let me help you. Okay. And then from there, there's that gateway that opens to personal things. I need a bit of help with this, or this is happening at home, or whatever like that. So a management team is not just all about the stuff on the field. It's actually more off the field, because if you think, we probably spend a lot more time with these kids than what they do at home with their families. So our influence is important.
All right, Sean. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. It's amazing to hear that there are so many people behind the first team, and what I really enjoy is that hearing that you guys are there for the boys, not just from a coaching point of view, but they're on a personal level. And with a lot of the high performance coaches I've had on the spot, they also got to coach the human being first. But what interest I wrote down, you spoke about family time. It's a moment of faith, and I'm a personal man of faith as well, and I believe in a higher power. I know where my strength comes from. But the question I had is that, how do you deal with players that don't share the same beliefs? How do you create the space where they can still be part of this so-called family time? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think what's important with that is the way that you lead your life, and the example that you are usually leads people to be inquisitive and ask why things are happening like they are. And we as a team often speak about the power that we have to inspire people in different ways. We have it's called TNT, takes no talent. It's one of our mottos in our team. And part of our TNT, that dynamite that we serve, is inspiring people. And I always say to boys, like, some of these boys have huge amount of followers. When we have touring teams come here, they take photos with our boys at training. They know the boys. They know all the boys. I mean, I'll never forget JC Mars, that's now playing for the Stormers. The England touring sides would come here and take photos with JC Mars. The twins now that sign professional contracts in Japan, everybody knew them. Everybody's taking photos. I mean, receive photos of them now in Japan with a whole bunch of people that are fans of them. So these boys, they are not just locally in Paarl. People know them. Everywhere across the world, people know them. And we always talk about, like, what do you do with your profile? And then we talk about inspiring. So, and I say to the boys, I'm not going to Bible bash. I'm not going to force you into anything that you don't want to do. But I just want you to give me the opportunity to be in an environment with us where we talk about what's good in life. Because somewhere along the line, we all have to make a choice. And for me, as a Christian and somebody that believes in God, I believe that's the biggest part of our faith, is choice. God gives us all choice. We have the choice to listen and participate, or do the right thing or do the wrong thing. It all comes down to choice. But the amazing part of all of that is that at any time in our lives, we're allowed to sit down and go like, okay, I've been down the wrong path for a long time. I'm ready to turn the corner. And I think that's what we do, is when we do family time, we talk about challenges in the week. We reference that back to our faith and how we can fix it. And then we talk about taking that problem and turning it into a positive on the field. And then we talk about the opportunity that comes afterwards when people talk to us and go, okay, jeepers, what makes this Paarl Boys High special? What makes this team so special? And right there is your opportunity to inspire people by what you're going to say next. And it's been amazing for me when I see the boys on TV doing interviews and whatever, talking about like the faith in the team. And we all know that they're kids. I always say to them, for some reason, a lot of time the boys, I think when we get older now, the boys look at us and go, you guys were never 18, so you don't know what we're going through, or you don't know what's going on in our lives. And I say to them, I think when people look back at my life when I was 18 or 19, they probably go like, jeepers, but what were you doing, young man?
Yeah.
Because we were all naughty and we did the wrong things at the wrong times. But it's now my space and my position, or my responsibility, to encourage boys through faith And we've had lots of boys of different faith in the team go like, okay, sir, but I'm this religion, or I'm this or that. How do you feel about it? And I say, no. It's all about wrong or right first. Let's go there first. It's all about doing the right thing at the right time, not doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. So firstly, we're going to talk about that. So when you are uncomfortable and you feel like I'm pushing you into a corner, which has never happened, then you're welcome to stand up and leave. But until then, you sit with the team, because we are sort of talking with that. And are you comfortable with that? And the guys go like, yeah, sir, let's try. And we've never had a scenario where people have walked out and gone like, okay, well, I'm uncomfortable with this, because everything that we talk about is about life and family within those pillars. Look at your situation at the moment. We might have had a tough week. Somebody's family died or something happens, and we talk about that comfort within a team and how we approach it. So for me, it's about creating an environment in the team where boys get comfortable with something, and somewhere along the line, somebody's going to ask a question. And then hopefully I'm geared correctly to go like, okay, so this is how I can help you with the experience that I have. And if I can't help, then we'll refer you to somebody else that can maybe chat to you. But, the sad thing is a lot of these boys don't always go to church, or don't always hear what it's all about, or they get caught up with somebody sort of trying to push them in a corner with religion or something like that. And that sort of scares young people away, because these guys just think differently. Just like we have to think differently about coaching them and keeping them in line and inspired and attentive to what you're trying to coach them on the field. The same way, you've got to do the same with them with their spiritual lives and doing the right things, because if we just keep looking the other way and going like, oh, well, that's the way that it is, and these are young people and that's what they do. As long as we all do that, we're part of the problem. But it's when I usually call the guys in one-on-ones and we close this door and I go like, listen, yeah, are you okay? Like, I can see something. And then that sort of triggers that conversation. And that's important to me.
Yes, that's brilliant. It definitely resonates me, because I think this is something which has been lost and at the highest level, at the elite level, especially when it comes to professional teams. And if I look back to our days at the Bulls, we had that family time, even though we didn't call it. That was just the way we worked. We started our week correctly. We were there for each other. Coaches were there for us on a human level, not just on a performance level. Those were the type of discussions. And I do believe that's where a lot of professional coaches are going to like. I believe that players need to play for something bigger, and something deep 100%. And profound. And, something that you mentioned there, and I totally agree with you. You got to start young. And I was fortunate, and I just want to use this opportunity to just thank all my teachers and everybody that supported me at Paarl Boys High. I do believe the skill set that I learned there, but also the foundations built around the three traditions of our school: good conduct, good scholarship, good sportsmanship. That still stands out. Small things like I'll be on the metro in Paris and I'll see an old lady getting on the train and there's no space. I'll stand up and give her my seat, or a woman or an elderly person. Those are the things that we were taught. But well, Sean, there's so many things you're touching base on, because you're talking about mindfulness, or bienveillance, as we say in France, and
100%.
Talking about empathy. That is so crucial, because I do believe in sport. And if you look at all the big teams, they're not just coaching rugby, they are coaching life. And I think often in high performance, you're so obsessed with it, you're so under pressure with it, that opportunity is not being created. It's not being created at all to actually teach this, because we look at the modern day player, the professional players, they are struggling with pressure. Some of them are struggling with depression. And I just want to say, well done to everything that you guys have created, creating that environment, creating that space for these young men to become better human beings, to one day become a great father, a great partner, a leader in life. That is brilliant. But Sean, what I want to talk, you just mentioned earlier, you spoke about the guys who are doing their walkthroughs during school breaks. That's it.
Yeah.
I've heard the stories. If you can maybe take us through, I won't say the sacrifice, but the investment of schoolboys in their rugby career. What are they doing? I know some schools are doing weight training at 5 a.m. They are doing video sessions in breaks and walkthroughs. Give us a bit of a global overview of What does it take from a schoolboy rugby player to perform?
Yeah, so I think, when we talk to the boys about their readiness, so our mindset going into seniors is always to think about the grade 11s, which is their second last year at school, to think about preparing them for their matric year, their final year. For the matrics, our mindset is in their final year to prepare them for professional rugby, because it is something that we feel is still part of our responsibility. Is we don't just want a guy to leave Paarl Boys and then he's all by himself. We want a youngster to leave here and go into a professional environment where people go like, wow, this is a quality human being and he is doing exceptionally well. And we want to be part of that journey. So we remain on our WhatsApp groups with the boys and constantly keep checking in on them. And with all of that, obviously, with the game being so professional and everybody wanting the next star, it is important that these guys are conditioned and ready for the impacts. I mean, when you look at some of our GPS data that we have with these guys, with the pods off them, the collisions and the intensity of what the game is played at the moment is enormous. So you want to make sure that you prepare that player. So in our off season, these guys are training like they are 5 o'clock in the gym. They are training. They've got an hour session. Part of that is prehab, rehab, stretching. They are working with a biokineticist to get them ready with their movement, their stretching, their return to play protocols. We've got a full-time physio, and like I said, we've got 2 team doctors at the moment that look after the medical need of these guys. So they get screened, they get looked after, they get made sure that everything is in there. Then approaching towards a season or coming into season now. I mean, it's still school holiday now, but when I walked into my office here now, half the squad is here. They're busy gymming, they're training. Nobody's asked them to be here. They're following programs. They're sort of getting stuck into the whole thing. So these guys they are in a professional state of training for rugby and preparing. But at the same time, mustn't forget that they are 17 and 18-year-old young men that are also still trying to woo some lady in town for a coffee and a milkshake and trying to be young men and do everything else. And we also want to make time for that. So on a Wednesday, for example, is our clear off day.
Okay.
We call it town day. I don't know if you can remember here, but I mean, then everybody, Paul, Jim, Boland, Landbouw, everybody's out in town, and all the beautiful young ladies are out, and the boys are taking them for coffee, and they're doing what young men should do. Yeah. So we make provision for that. But usually in season, to give you an idea, the guys are busy planning now for this season now, and we come back in a week's time. The guys will be on a Monday, they will have a gym session, they'll have a video session, they'll have a training session on the field. Because we try and keep the time down on their feet, on the field, we try and train for an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes. So we have to try and fill those spaces somewhere else to get the detail in. So during first break, George might call the guys and the forwards in, and they'll do a line-out walkthrough for the weekend, the line-out menu, work, attack and defensive mindsets. We might do attacking walkthrough at break time. We might have a leadership meeting, everything during the first break. Second break, most of our guys go and have lunch. Our boarders go and eat, so we try and give them that long break to just be by themselves. But usually first break is used for walkthroughs, meetings, clarity, making sure everybody understands what the job is. On top of that, every player gets a presentation, a video presentation of the opposition, strengths, weaknesses, what we want to target, where we want to go, how we want to play, a field map, a playing map. Everything is sort of put in. Then on Monday, short session, all kicking, long distance running, big session on a Monday, short but big. And then on Tuesday is more attack focused, although we always focus on both sides. And then Wednesday is the off day. Thursday is a defensive hard session, scrumming units, big load on the legs. And then Friday is off day again for the guys to relax before they get together on Saturday. So 4 days a week. Sundays, all the analysis comes through. I'll cut everything and break it all down, send it to my coaches. And then on a Monday morning, when the guys walk in again into their gym session, all their clips, everything is already shared for them, and they can access all of that to get ready for the week again. Yeah.
Well, it's a professional setup. It's not a semi-professional. So I don't agree with you on that. Sean, I want to come. I want to come back to, because we can speak on. There's so many things I want to talk a bit about the school and highlight as well. But I want to come back to you, Sean Erasmus, the coach. Tell us a bit about your journey, where you started. I know you spent some time at the Sharks. You spent some time at Glenwood. What got you into coaching? Why become a coach? Because I can clearly see you are not driven by performance. Performance is of the result of the culture and the environment you have created, and that's special. And I can tell you this: I've had some great coaches on here. I've had, George Parling on here. I had Richie Gray. I had Gary Gold. I recently had Neil Hatley on as well. And listen, the way you speak is you're speaking at someone that is coaching at probably the highest level, the language you're using. So well done on that. But what is different is that just the way you're talking about the coachabilities of players, impacting players' lives, inspiring people, that's brilliant. But tell me, where did this passion start? What made you decide to become a coach?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very small town in the Natal Midlands, KwaZulu-Natal Midlands, Escort, and I had a coach there, Herman Viljoen. His brother was Hannes Viljoen. They both played provincial rugby. And there was another coach, Louis van Heerden, that was sort of our woodwork teacher, and Herman Viljoen was our PT teacher, if I can remember correctly. And I started playing first team at the end of standard 7. I got my first opportunity, which is now grade 9. And my journey with these guys was just so special. I always felt safe in their sort of team environment, off the field, on the field. I felt like these guys were somebody that I could talk to, that I could have a relationship with. I remember the one day having a hard time with my girlfriend. I didn't know quite how to deal with it. My dad was like, like they were quite like hard about things like that when I grew up. And you sort of like don't want to go talk to your dad about that at that moment. And I remember walking into his office the one day, and we sat down for quite some time, and we had a chat. And I just felt like, jeepers, this guy, I'm prepared to go to war for this guy, because of who he was for me off the field. And although there was always this discipline and this hard approach on the field, there was always fairness. There was always compassion. There was always this love that I felt like, jeepers, this guy, this is like a second father for me. And then in my matric year, he was diagnosed with cancer, and we actually did a post-matric for him, 3 of us. We stayed another year at school. It was the first time post-matric sort of became a thing in South Africa, and I did another year for him. He was dying of cancer, and we felt like we owed him that, so we did another year for him. And when I finished there, I always sort of like felt like, the frustration for me working with other coaches was always like, if you weren't good enough, there was never honest and open discussion. There was never anybody that said, this is how you become better. There was always this hide behind, well, maybe, you need to work a little bit on your throwing. I was a hooker, maybe your throwing is not that good. And in my head, I was like, well, all my lineouts are being won, so how are you not picking me for that? So it's never that honest and open discussion. But with Herman Viljoen, who was my coach, it was always like, listen, but you got to get this right. Like, this is what you need to do right. So there was always this thing about, I'm going to be open and honest with you because I care for you. And then when I went and played rugby in Durban, I played for Harlequins. I hurt my back and my neck, and I obviously had to make ends meet. And I walked into Grosvenor Boys there, which was a school next door. They're well known for their surfing, not their rugby. And I walked in there to just try and get a job close to where I was playing rugby. And I tell the story, bumped into the first team coach who was on his way out. He wasn't going to coach anymore, sort of put his whistle on my chest and said, congratulations, you're the new first team coach. So going from a point of, I just want to help out a bit and earn a bit of money, to coaching the first team, that's how it sort of went. And then when I started working with these guys, they were exactly the same. I mean, some days, some of the guys weren't there. They were surfing or fishing or whatever. And then you arrive at training. And I started thinking like, okay, these guys need to be cared for, and they need to have somebody that they trust. So I started moving sessions to the beach and doing things differently. And soon there was this relationship between myself and these players. And something that I picked up with, and it's still the same, is if people believe in you and they trust in you and they think that you are there for them, that they'll go all the way for you. And I always say to the boys, when I look at some coaching environments, I sometimes feel sad because I think, jeepers, I'd also like to be that really good guy all the time, like that everybody loves and high fives and whatever. But sometimes I've got to be that strong, disciplined person and say this isn't good enough and we need to make it better. And I think with all of that, it's always been fair. And I always say to the boys here, I always say to them, like, guys, when I'm not fair and when I go into your character and I break you down, you need to walk in here and go like, coach, that's not good enough. And I'll apologize immediately, because we are all humans, no matter what our ages. There's got to be that respect. So I got into coaching for that initially, and it sort of developed. I love this. I mean, somebody said to me the other day, said, yes, coach, you haven't got a year older. And I said, yes, you say the best things. But I think the coaching keeps me young, because these guys sort of keep challenging with your mindset and your thinking. And every year you've got to think differently about them. And every year you've got to, so coaching is something that I want to do. First thing is I want to win hearts for Jesus, because I believe that that's my goal. Somebody prophesied that over my life one day and said, you're going to be there for young people. You're going to inspire them and do something in their lives. And I think that's what I want to be. The second thing is I want to make young men better men, because we all need those men. I always say to the guys, I can't remember 5 years ago into school score. I can't remember it. But I can tell you in that year how many boys gave their lives to Jesus or changed their lives or had better relationships with their parents. And those were the big wins for me. Those were like the massive wins. And when I have boys coming back now and they come and hug me and they say, sir, this is my wife, or this is this, or this is my child, or this, then I like smile. I'm like, I go home and I tell my wife, like, you won't believe who I saw, this kid. And he came and, gave me a hug and whatever. And that remains most important thing, because I don't think one day I'm going to be judged for the amount of wins or losses, but by the amount of people that I touched and changed lives with. So it's always a dream for me to coach. I still struggle and battle in my heart a lot of times and say, like, I wish I get the opportunity to be a head coach of a franchise one day, because I think, and with all due respect to everybody, because everybody runs things differently, but I think because of pressure, a lot of times, and even myself, I've lost my way as a human being under pressure, where I've sort of gone and put all the pressure on the boys. 2 years ago, that's who I was. I came out of the Lions thing, and it wasn't good for me. And I sort of like just kept looking down on myself and not believing why, and remembering why I was in the game. And then that pressure went on to the players, and nobody had a good time. Nobody had a good time that year because of me, of who I was. So as a head coach and as a coach, I've always got to go back to that and go like, I'm here to set the tone and to make sure that everybody has a good time. And I still don't get it right a lot of times, and I still develop as a coach. I'm not saying I've got it 100% right, but I always try and look back and go like, when is everybody having the best time of their lives, and when is everybody doing well? And then we only start talking about winning later, because that's a byproduct of a great environment, a great coaching staff that are having a good time and enjoying what they do. So that goes. That's why I coach. That's why I want to do what I want to do. Winning is obviously nice for everybody. And that's obviously, people always go like, yeah, but you're so culture driven. Do you not care about winning? I go like, no, I mean, obviously we all do what we do in life to be the best at what we do. But along the way there, we've got to choose about what does that come at? What cost? Does it come at sort of getting stuck in breaking down people, or is it building people while we do that? And then if we're winning on the people side, I'd rather take that instead of a score. And I make mistakes. I often say to parents and to the boys, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I make mistakes. That's just who I am. But I want to always be remembered as that coach that wore my heart on my sleeve, that was fair, and that made a difference in people's lives. And then obviously also did a great job at coaching Paarl Boys and whoever else.
Wow, Sean, thanks for sharing that. Firstly, by admitting that there were times that you were wrong, I think that's the most important thing. Sometimes the egos of coaches get in the way, and it starts becoming about them and not the team. And it's great for you to have that sense of, I won't say accountability, but that ability to reflect and say, okay, what am I doing? This is not right. I need to move on. I think that is so crucial. And I get where you're coming from. Sometimes coaching at the highest level is not easy, and getting into that position, each team, each club, each franchise, like you just mentioned, they function different. I remember my journey at the end of my rugby career when I decided to go into coaching. I waited about 2 years to get my first professional gig, and I was a professional former athlete as well, and I know that's not easy. And at the end of the day, what do we do with that time? And once again, I'm finding myself in that position where I'm in a transition period. I stopped coaching at La Rochelle, and I'm looking for the next opportunity as a forwards coach and manager. I want to be what you just mentioned there. That's what I want to do in inspiring men. All right, inspiring players to become better human beings, and that is crucial. And I've used in this time. I've been very blessed. I've created this online community on the platform called School, all right, with a K, not CH. And, and I've just been living my passion as a coach. I'm not physically coaching a team right now, but that has led into so many things. I spoke to a coach in the US, and the feedback said, gee, you have reignited my passion for coaching. And I realized the way I was coaching was wrong. I'm working with young coaches that are coaching professionally. And they said, gee, your philosophies that you're sharing with me, it works, it helps. And we can have different ways of having an impact on people. I resort to the podcast and my online community in the time being, but that is something which I'm striving to as well as a coach. I'm not just striving to coach at the highest level because it's great. It's a great achievement. It's a great accolade. It's about impacting change. That's why I do this podcast, and that's why I wanted you on this podcast. I know about the work that you are doing, and everybody's speaking about it. And I'll be honest with you, and you could see it. I could see it when I spent some time with you guys last year, and it's always a privilege spending time with you guys. And I can see how invested the boys are. I can see that humility. I didn't pick up one player that was slightly arrogant or thinking too much about having a bit of an air about himself. But Sean, in talking about your coaching career, a lot of people refer to, the Boys High dynasty in 2000. I think, correct me on the dates, 2015, 2017. You guys were unbeaten. So if we look back now, that is quite a few years ago. Time goes by quickly. And obviously, you mentioned after that you went into the Lions. But in that 3-year period, what do you believe as a coach was the success? And I know you've touched on a lot of the core values and the foundations of the way you coach and your team and the culture. But if we have to quickly go back to that period, what would you say was the key to success? What drove you guys and that led to that unbeaten, stint for 3 years?
Yeah, so I always tell people, obviously coming out of 2014, we lost inter-schools very narrowly that year, and I sort of felt like, jeepers, I want to try and fix it. So there's a competition here. There used to be a competition in the Western Cape called the Burger, which is a local newspaper here, or the Beeldtrofee sort of trophy, and then you play within the provinces, and then it's like a semi-final, a final. And I said to the assistant coach, Elmer Wolfart at that time, who's an amazing human being. When I started here, you would know him in your time. He was sort of my assistant coach. And I said, jeepers, I want to fix this, losing this inter-school games. And he was like, just leave it now. We'll reset and get everything ready again in 2015. And I was adamant. So we went into this competition, and everybody else was sort of pulling out of it. And we said, okay, go. And yes, we ended up getting stuck in the snow on the way somewhere, and everything just went wrong. And then we lost to Marlow 10-9 in Marlow. Now, obviously Marlow, with all due respect, that time, it's a small farming school. We should have never lost there. We lost 10-9. To them, and I'm like driving back on the bus, and I'm like, I could just hear Elmer's thoughts were like, I told you so. But then 2015 we went with this team. A lot of these guys were youngsters. Then we went to Eiserfontein, which is on the west coast, and we did a camp there and prepared. And every morning these guys would go for a jog along the coast, and we would go to the left and sort of get them some breakfast and whatever, and then meet them at the place. And it wasn't far. It should have been quick, but by the time we were finished in the shops and got there, these guys were only arriving at this place. And like the second morning, I said to the coaches, this is very weird. Excuse me. I just want these guys to run. I want to give it a bit of time, and then I want to turn around. And as these guys were running, we sort of drove to the left and then turned around, waited a little bit. And as I went down the other road, I could see this team. As soon as they were out of sight, they just stopped. They walked and they messed around and took their time and whatever. And I drove in behind them and I said, I thought that I told you guys you needed to run. But I see this is your character. So now I dropped Rainer, the conditioning coach, off, and I said it was his first year there as well. And I said, Rainer, now you make these guys run until they can make the time that I wanted. And I gave an unrealistic time. And these guys ran literally for a half a day. And then we went into this conference room where we spoke about our values before. And I said to them, you guys are false. You are who you are when nobody's looking. And that's who you guys are. When nobody looks, you start walking. That's who you are. I said, now we've lost inter-schools. A lot of you guys were part of that journey. I said, what do you think is going to be different this year? No, we're going to do well. I said, no, we're not. Because your character is never going to be better. Your character sucks. You guys are terrible. And I remember going off there for 10 minutes. And I said to him, so now I'm going to leave you guys here. I'm going to walk out with the staff. Then when you guys are ready to accept the challenge and the legacy that you have being in Paarl Boys High, which is traditionally one of the top 5 schools in this country, when you realize your responsibility to your families and everybody else, and I'm not talking about winning, I'm talking about your character, then come and call us. And we sat out there for 2.5 hours. And the captain there, Andreas van Wyk, funny enough, while we're talking, I'm looking at that photo, he calls me and he says, sir, come inside. And on a board there, they had a bunch of words there. There were 5 or 6 words. And at the top of that board was ETFG. And I said, what's this? And they said, that's every try for God. And I said, what's that going to help us with? And they said, no, that's going to be the fiber of this Paarl Boys High team from now on. And that's where faith comes from, our first pillar. Without knowing that time, it wasn't even part of who we were. And then they said they want to inspire their families and the people around them because, the school comes out every weekend. We've got 6,000-7,000 people sitting on the side of our field during any game on a Saturday.
Ridiculous.
They want these guys to be proud again of them because a lot of the school don't want to come and watch anymore. They sort of half the school pitch up and, these guys come out of their own and they've stopped coming because of who this team was. And that, obviously that's where family came in my mind. Okay, that's family. And then they spoke about being this team that leaves a legacy for every other Boys High team to understand how special it is. And they never spoke about winning. There was never winning on that thing. And I said to them, okay, cool. You guys wrote this down. I didn't. You wrote this down. So you've got to live by it. You've got to die by it and you've got to go. And obviously, then the coaching team was the first year that we also came together. David Sadi came and Almuvaz was there. So I hope I don't forget anybody. Anzel was the physio. Doc Ace was the doctor. When Johnny van die Kerk, who is a legend at Paarl Boys High, who's, in and out and still working. He became part of that management team and everything. And we just drove these values with these guys. And we just trained like machines and we just kept going. And they just started believing. They just absolutely started believing. There was never a time where these guys came off the field and didn't believe they were the best team in this country. And yes, they were a talented group, but the belief was just exceptional. And we went from 2015 with those values. 2016, the team sort of tweaked their way again and whatever. And then in sort of 2016, the guys started feeling the pressure. And I sort of went back to him. I said, let's just address the elephant in the room here. So what? If you lose, so what? Then you start winning again. That's just what it is. That's life. You lose and you win. So don't focus on the winning or losing. Just focus on what you guys said that you wanted to achieve. And so, we went 3 years unbeaten. We lost in 2017 on tour. We lost to Christchurch. Dubious decision, but we won't go into it. Referee decision. But we came back and we won. I mean, and in that time, first time we won at Grey College in Bloemfontein. Won big games against great schools and great coaches. But it was always just about that team culture and what they stood for. So, it was a special time. I don't think there's been many teams that are in this current league that have successfully done that over 3 years, home and away. And I mean, So, but it all came down to what started in that 2015 with the team making a decision like, this is what it's going to be now.
Oh, wow. Sean, this is some great stuff, everything that you're sharing, because it really gives everybody listening, understanding the depth, of coaching, because a lot of the philosophies that you're sharing, it's not just applicable to schoolboy rugby. It's applicable to the highest level. It's applicable to life. If you don't believe in something, if you don't have a strong set of core values, if those core values is just words on the wall, and we often see this in professional clubs, they got all these words: humility, respect, honor, but players don't live and breathe it. And you mentioned it, like, what are you doing when nobody's watching? What are you doing when nobody's watching? That was the foundation of my career as well, doing my extra running sessions and, working hard. And I'll be honest, I learned what it meant to work hard when I was at Paarl Boys High. I remember back in the day with, we used to call them the Versaghi brothers, but even though they weren't brothers, Richard and Hannes Versaghi, and, Richard, oh, what a legend, and Hannes Versaghi as well.
Good men,
Great men, and still, that just talks about the impact they had on me. Even today, when I'm back in Paarl, I always love to catch up with Richard. And funny, I went with the under 19 F team last year, and no, I'm so used to going in for scrum coaching, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I looked at 20, 30 minutes were done. I look at Richard and I said, "Sir," and I said to him, "Time's up." He's like, no, the boys are enjoying. Going for another 30 minutes.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, it's just so important. I think, one of the reasons that I wanted you to come, because I want coaches to hear this, firstly, the responsibility we have. We have young men or men's lives in our hands, and we have the ability to shape it and to mold it. And even today, whenever I'm back into South Africa, every time I always ring you up and say, "Hey, Sean, I'm here. How can I help?" Or I catch up. Try and catch up with Richard as well. And unfortunately, the times when I come back, it's always school holidays. I can't visit the school, but I did take my kids to show them, where I was. And then I think what I want to talk about next, because there's a few things that I also want to just cover before we end up our chat. Young men have changed. We're dealing with a different generation. I'm in the process of reading a book called The Anxious Generation. They're talking about the impact of social media. You mentioned earlier, and I think this is the question I have. How is it possible that teams overseas know the players in South Africa? Is that due to social media? Is it due to the games being televised? If you can maybe just quickly answer that.
Yeah, social media has become massive. I mean, obviously TikTok, Instagram, it's just, the amount, if you look at these guys and you look at their followers on Instagram and people that follow them on all the social media platforms, it's guys from all over the world. And obviously with these guys playing in World Schools festivals and everything else like that, they sort of blend and mix. But yeah, like I said to you, every single year we have at least 10 to 15 touring sides that come here and play at Paarl Boys High in the last part of our season. And all these guys, when we train on the main field, will stand there and they'll watch our training, and afterwards I'll take photos with the boys. And I always ask, how do you guys know? And they're like, we watch them on Instagram, we follow them. And obviously everything is streamed now, and everybody's looking at everybody's stuff. So yeah, rugby at schoolboy level is a global game as well.
So now this comes in because rugby players are different. I believe what worked for yourself when you were a kid, maybe there are some things would still work. And the way I was taught, I grew up with coaches who were very militant, and even at university, had a former military that was our S&C coach. We, for warm-up, we used to run 700 meters, stuff like that. Yeah. But how is this new generation different? And what is the key to helping them become better human beings, but also better rugby players?
So I absolutely believe a lot of times that kids have changed because adults have changed. And I think there's some things that we need to adapt and be better at, but there's some things that need to stay the same. When it comes to respect and discipline and all those other things, I don't think there's need for us to change that, because it is important to have that, and everybody needs to understand. I always talk to my son about that. He's a very good man. And I always say to him, like, the way that you are respectful and your discipline and the way that you carry yourself when people are looking at you, you don't think so, but everybody's always looking at you. The way that you are, the respect that you spoke about, standing up for an older person, all those values, they don't need to change. For some reason, somebody has thought along the line that those things have to change. They shouldn't change. They should never change, because that's what defines our characters. And our character is something that is non-negotiable, and it should never be negotiable. So I think that should never change. And when we also work with the boys, we always say, like, there's some things that are never going to change. Being on time, giving your best, always giving 100% effort, being disciplined on the field, the way that you speak, your language, drinking and smoking, all those things and whatever, that's never going to change. There's never going to be a case where somebody's going to tell me, while a professional guy or somebody can be out till 2 a.m, swear and do all these other things and look at crazy stuff on his phone and then be a good human being. That's never going to change. So those things have never changed. But the way that these players are learning, the way that they're using technology to sort of boost what they do in their lives, and their emotional intelligence, a lot of times, is something that has had to change from our side. And it's weird, because a lot of times, it's crazy with my son now, like I say, using him as reference, and some of the boys that I coach. When we go on tour, these guys put their playlist on, and then some guys have got some of this gangster music or some music or whatever they call it now, or whatever like that, that I struggle to even hear the words, but the guys are sort of like jamming to it. And then I go like, well, that's okay. That's what they do, and that's what gets them on. But most of these boys are playing 80s and 90s music now. And it's okay. Amazing for me sometimes how this circle is coming around. And then I'd say to my son, when we do a barbecue together, or a bra, as we refer to it, then he plays some good music that I used to jam to when I was young. And then he says, no, it's really cool music and whatever. So a lot of things have never changed. I think we have changed a lot of times, but I definitely feel that the way that we work with the boys now, the relationships that we forge with them, and the way that we teach them has had to change, because guys are instant. I mean, you know as well as I do, if you want something to eat now, it will take 15 minutes and it'll be at your doorstep. So it's instant. If you want something online now or whatever like that, or you want to download it, it takes 2 minutes and it's in your hands. So we also have to look at how we make certain things instant, but get the learning or the clarity with that online and spot on. And I always feel like the way that we've done that, I mean, a lot of guys from other schools up north and whatever talk to us about, what do you think is the difference? Why, when we play North-South each year, that big tournament in South Africa, we always sort of win more games South than the North does. And everybody's like, why is that? Because the talent is very similar, and it is, and the coaching is good and everything else is good. And I say to the guys, I think a lot of times down here, it's still old school approach. We are still very old school. Like you say, Paarl Boys is still rooted in discipline and respect and doing the right things at the right time. That's never going to change here. The boys still play touch rugby at break here. When you go look at all those other schools there, the guys are sitting at break around a table and on their phones, and there's no conversation. Yeah, the guys are playing touch. Every break they're coming in here, I lose like 3 balls a break because they never bring them back, the buggers. But, they're sort of like, they're still playing at break time. They're still playing. They're still boys. They are out in town. They're drinking a cup of coffee with a girl. They're drinking a milkshake. They are still boys. And I think that remains the most important thing is when we move away from those core values of discipline and building character, and we think that we have to be different now because we have to accommodate everybody else. That's where the problem is, because in this environment, this is how we do it. So if it suits you and this is what you want to be, you're going to come here. If the other environment suits you and that's who you want to be, well, then we'll respect that and you go there. But here, I still think it's old school discipline. It's respect. It's built on the great characteristics of every human being should have. And then from there, we adapt as adults and go like, okay, how do we teach these guys better? How do we make them better? How do we communicate on their level? But we bring the old school back for sure. We still stick with old school on values.
That's brilliant. I must say, when I came back in, I honestly enjoyed it. Even walking there at training, and guys are standing up and greeting. And what definitely struck me was the guy was like in Afrikaans, they would say hello oom, which means uncle in English and Afrikaans.
Biggest form of respect ever.
It's a form of respect, or hi, good day, sir, good afternoon, sir. And I'm not used to, like, even here in France, like, people just called me on my first name. Even sometimes, like I would have my kids' friends come and they would just call me hello, Gerthro, or they'd heard someone called me G. I'm like, who are you talking? Like, even with my players, they would come to me, hey, G. I'm like, who the fuck is your G? I'm like, you call me on my name, my surname or what coach or whatever. But I think that is important. That is so great to see that those core values are still being driven. And I agree with you. I think, yes, the world has changed and evolved. Yes, we do need to change at times the way we are communicating and stimulating the new generation. But at the end of the day, we still got to drive those core. I mean, even today, I'm 44 years old. When I message Richard Versace, I don't go, hi, Richard, how are you doing? I say, yes. Hi, sir, how are you doing?
Yeah.
I still use it. That's the language I use. Even when I speak to him, I still use the word sir, because that's how we got grafted up. And I think this comes on now to my next question. I know we're running out of time here. Is that, things can be challenging for players, and I do believe that sometimes we focus a lot on rugby. So my question to you, and I'm sure this is the case at Paarl Boys High, are you guys still driving what we call in French double projet? So that means the double project. So that means, okay, rugby is great, but what are you doing outside of rugby in terms of the academics? So as a coach, do you still focus on that? And what is the conditions that you are creating for the players? Because with the load, the physical and the mental load of really driving performance in rugby, it takes its toll on these young men. So is that still something which you guys are pushing, that they still need to prepare for something outside of rugby?
Yeah, look, I mean, to be honest, a lot of times you get frustrated as a coach because you want more time with the players and you sort of want to sort of get them into training a lot earlier. But at this time of the season, for example, with us now, everybody's in summer here. So all the boys have to do athletics. They have to do a summer sport. So some of the boys are playing cricket. Others are doing athletics. Some of them are doing water polo. So yes, Boys High is always going to be that school of balance. Although a lot of times as the head coach, I sort of go like, please just give me more time. Can't these guys train a bit more? We've only got 8 weeks to prepare for the game, and whatever. And I must say, that's also helped me a lot of times, because I've come out of some environments where like people go like, hey, you take all the time you want. Rugby is number one here. Like you got to just win, and you've got to. And I think when I came to Paarl Boys, with it being a traditional boys' school with those traditional values of balance and making sure that the boys are these well-rounded young men, that has been something that I've become a better coach with as well. Because a lot of times I think we get carried away with the pressure and wanting to do well, that we sort of just keep piling on the work to the boys, and they eventually just get tired of rugby. It's not something that they love anymore. It becomes a job at a very young age, and that's obviously not what we want. So like I said to you, with giving the guys a day off in the week to go and do whatever they want, it's the same now with us going like, listen, guys, all of you, we've got 55 in the group at the moment for the first team squad. There's 55 in our group. Wow. All of you have to do athletics. And then the props like look at me and go like, what do you want me to do? And I said, well, guys, you are going to do shot put or discus, or I want you guys, I want you guys to do the hammer throw, because it's going to help with your explosiveness, and do 100-meter sprints. I don't care if you come last, but burn those other athletes up. And the Lucies do 200s and 400s, and our backs do 100 and 200s. And I say to them, like, except for serving the school, you're also like improving yourself and becoming more rounded and getting a little bit of a taste or something else. And athletics is still massive. Yeah. I mean, again, like the amount of people we get for a rugby game, you get to the athletics meetings here, with all the schools, and it's sort of like the opportunity for all our guys to like go, we are quicker than you guys, so we'll see you on the field, but before that, we'll just beat you in a relay race or sort of get stuck. And so there's that sort of competition there. So yes, we are focusing on that. And during exams, the school's like, guys, you can train an hour only. That's it, maximum. You're not allowed to train longer than that. And when the boys have like science or big subjects or maths or that is really tough, they go like, sir, do you mind? And then we swap the program around, and we're adaptable for that, because we want them to do well. and everything. A lot of our players are leaders in the school, head boys. They all come out of this. So yeah, we want the guys to also, like you say, do well. And what I'm really proud of, I mean, we've got out of the 30 boys from last year in our first and second team, we've got 19 boys that signed professional contracts to play professional rugby this year. And 90% of those boys are all studying with that, have got study bursaries with that. So I'm exceptionally proud of that because, yes, if they do pick up an injury, there's life after rugby and they've got to pursue that.
Just stepping quickly away from rugby, being the rugby coach and the head of the first team, what impact can you still see what the school has on these young men? What is the school bringing to these, not just rugby players, but all these kids in school? What makes, Paul, I think you've touched base a bit, still a bit old school, the core values, discipline, work ethic, but just as a coach, what you're seeing, like from the teachers, the way the school's being run, what's making that big difference in the lives of these young men, and why some of them don't become rugby players, some of them become leaders. We've seen Paarl Boys High, some of them have achieved great things. What would you say is the big difference and why the school is different?
Yeah, again, reference with my son. My son broke his neck when he was 13, and by the grace of God, he wasn't paralyzed, but he could never do contact sport again. So he chose to go into hockey. He's a very physical hockey player. But, when I look at him, and him and I often speak about the impact that Paarl Boys has had on him. When I look at the staff and the amount of work that they do here, we're very easy to criticize and look at a system and go like, yeah, but you guys can do more in class, or you can do this or whatever. But when I look at this school, the reason why I'm at a school like this is because of the old school feel. The look at the traditional values that still get taught to the boys, but also the love and care that these boys get from these teachers, extra lessons, extra work that they do, put in the extra time for them. This year, without any of the boys knowing, I put out a poll on the staff group and I said, this Saturday, I would like to invite you, if you would like, to hand over the first and second team jerseys to the boys in the change room. They won't know about it. Will you please send a message and tick a player that you would have? I mean, Guthrie, I had to say to some of the staff, sorry, somebody's already got. And then eventually I had two staff members handing a boy's jersey over. And then the day when I opened that door and I saw the staff walk in, and the boys were so surprised, they didn't know that these teachers were coming out. It said a lot to me about the relationship that we don't know the boys and the staff have, and the impact that these people have, and how the staff care for these boys in their own special way. And when I see the old boys, I mean, Paarl Boys has a massive old boys organization, which you are part of. When I see us touring overseas, when we were in UK and Ireland last year, and we're off to France and Italy now in December this year, when I see us move on the airports and the amount of people that stop us and go like, I'm an old boy, or I know Paarl Boys High, and they don't talk just about the rugby. They talk about, hey, is that teacher still there? And is this still there? And do you guys still do that? And we all go like, yeah. And the boys go like, sir, that guy's like 50 years old and we're still doing the same as what we did then. And he still talks about how good it is. Then like, okay, you're in an awesome environment. You're in a top class place in school where it's hard on school. It's hard on academics. It's hard on culture. It's hard on values. It's hard on everything, but they do well at everything that they do. And that obviously tells you that everybody here does things right. And me personally, I mean, that's just my personality. I reflect often and go like, yes, I want to push something for rugby. And then the guys at the top go like, leadership go like, no, you can't do it. And then I'm frustrated. But then after a while, you sit down and you think like, are you trying to change something that's over 150 years old? And maybe, yes, I am. And it doesn't need to be changed because it's working. So why change it? So I have to reflect a lot of times. I bump heads a lot of time with people because I think I have good ideas, but their experience and their age and this environment and seeing it work before I was even here keeps telling me again and again that I need to learn from that as well. And tradition is an important part of who we are, and the history of environments. We should treasure that and look after it, and not always try and change it to suit us, but rather respect why it's been there for 150 years. If it wasn't working, it wouldn't be there for 150 years.
It just hit me, just coming back to the three traditions, even though those are the three traditions or core values of the school, that you can apply to life as well. At the end of a good conduct, treating people with respect, behaving in a certain manner, having empathy, really serving people at the end of the day. And if you look at good scholarship, being a student of life, upskilling yourself, constantly improving. I always tell the rugby players, become a student of the game, watch your games. And even like I'm a student of life. I'm constantly researching how other things work, how AI is working. And, I've recently, kind of like gone back to old school. So I do AI and analog. So I still do journaling and all those type of things, keep track of all those type of things, which is important. And then coming down to good sportsmanship. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of this. Like a guy puts in a great tackle and everybody's shouting and screaming, woo, and going crazy. I call it, I'll go on with Bongi from the box. He calls that plastic energy, but you can be respectful. And I must admit this, I think I saw an image as well of the inter-schools where a player of Paarl Gymnasium was on the ground. He was broken, which is always the case, no matter which team loses with this Paarl Boys High gym. And I actually saw a Paarl Boys High player go and come for the Paarl gym. And I saw vice versa a few years ago as well. Some of the Paarl gym players do the same, with Paarl. So sportsmanship, and where does that come into? It's not just on the playing field. That's in life. You just see someone is down, show interest. I always say, in France, everybody always say, ça va, ça va. They're like, how's it going, how's it going? But they don't really mean it. But if you stop and you look at that person in the eye and you say, how are you doing? Really? And then you'll be surprised what comes up. And, being conscious of people around you. So definitely to the audience listening, those three principles can definitely apply to that. Good conduct, good scholarship, good sportsmanship. That can be applied into life. Sean, it's been amazing speaking to you. I have so many other questions, but I don't want to keep you any longer here. Definitely, and I think to all the players, young players listening and coaches listening, and I think parents as well. But I'm going to ask you this quickly because I've parents. Obviously parents, they have high expectations of their kids, and some parents believe their son is going to be the next Springbok, and they believe their son can be professional, and sometimes they can be a bit too much. So what advice would you give to parents so they can actually allow coaches to do their work and guide their child on the right path? And I always take my dad. My dad never put pressure on me. He just asked me one day, he said, listen, are you serious about becoming a professional rugby player? I was like, yes. And then he pushed me. He said, well, you're going to need discipline. And he made me run. And after training, I had to run back home. We live in Charleston Hill, and it was about a 7-kilometer trip back home. So what advice would you, it's far. So what advice would you give to parents, who have boys, young men that want to become professional rugby players?
Yeah, I think once again, when I use the reference of my son played second team hockey. He was the captain this year. And often, I don't know much about hockey, but often when I watch, I think like, jeepers, I wish he could get an opportunity to play first team, even if it's just off the bench. And when I look at my son through my eyes, I think like he's the best because I love him. And that's what dads are supposed to do. And the head coach or head of hockey is like literally 10 meters away from me. And then often I say to my wife, jeepers, I sometimes feel I want to go and ask him, when's my son going to get an opportunity? And then my wife goes like, but you don't want that pressure as a coach, so don't put that pressure on him. And I think the reason why I mention that is because my approach with parents have always been like, I respect when they come in here and they want to talk to me about their son. And I always say to them, like, that conversation, the way that it goes is most important, because if you trust me and you believe that I'm there with the right heart doing the right thing, whether you agree with it or not, that is the most important part of it. the fact that I must go to bed every night and wear that, which is huge pressure. People don't understand when you work with these kids, they become family. They are like my boys. I spend a lot of time with them. They become like my boys. I always tell them, I love you like I love Matthew, my son. I love them like that. I'm always trying to look out for them. So with that heart, it's hard for us as coaches when you sit down and do selection and try and pick a team, because we've only got 15 jerseys and there's always going to be somebody unhappy. So we never sort of do a 10-minute selection meeting. It's usually an hour, 2 hours, because we end up talking about how that guy's going to feel when we tell him, sorry, we can't pick him. So on that, I always say to the coaches, sometimes you get parents that come in hot and steamy and they really get personal, and that's quite tough to work with. And I've really got to bite down on it sometimes. But I've learned that people come in here because they love their sons and they care about them and they want the best for them. So the first approach from my side is always like, I'm listening to you because I know you love your son and I respect that. And you believe in him. And because of that, I want to have a chat. A lot of people say, and, when you look at pro rugby and everything else, that one-on-ones have stopped. People don't have discussions with players anymore or with people. And I think it's a different environment at pro level because there's a lot at stake and there's different pressures there. But at school, I still feel that I always say to the parents, first, your son comes and sits with me and say, Coach, I'm unhappy. You're not picking me. I don't agree. I don't know why. Tell me. That's the first part of the discussion. And if him and I can't resolve it and make it better and he understands where I'm coming from, then the next discussion with the parent is going to be there. And I respect that. So over time, I've learned to respect that. In the beginning, as a coach, I think you a lot of times hey, I don't want to talk about this because there are difficult discussions. But when there's clarity and when there's honesty, similar with players, if it's honest and it's clear, as with players, parents also sort of go like, okay, I understand what you're thinking. I understand what you see now. And then we try and make it better. We try and fix that player's issues or problems on the field and technically coach everything that we've got into them. But yeah, parents, when they come in here, it's because they love their children, and that's my approach, and that's how I think about it. There have been instances where it's been really tough conversation. It's never nice for me. I always say to people, when you think I sit behind my door and revel at not picking your son, then you don't understand who I am and who this coaching staff is, because that's not what we do. We have a very tough job in a top rugby school like this, in a top school like Paarl Boys. You've probably got about, like I said to you now, our first team squad's 55. When I tell that to a lot of the coaches around here, they go like, well, that's the amount of boys we've got in total that play rugby at senior level. We've got 55 talented boys that actually wear a first team jersey right now. So how do you pick 15? Somewhere 30 of them are going to be a 35 or whatever, 40 of them are going to be unhappy. So that's the tough job. That's the tough part of our job. So yes, when parents do come in, I tend to sort of go like, you are here because you love your son and I respect.
Oh, well done. No, thanks for sharing. I think there's no more fitting way to end of this podcast. You mentioned that just above your head, you got a poster there that was apparently in your guys' locker room. If you could maybe show that to us, to our audience, and maybe just give us the background story about that.
Yeah, so that's got to do a lot with culture. Okay. Yeah, everything that we stand for, like I said, faith, family, and team at the top there. Takes no talent. The gorilla represents our defensive mindset and how we think about our defense, being brutal and to the point. And then we are them and they are us. At the bottom there is our reference to the school. So that's 1,000 boys that come out weekend after weekend to watch this team play. So I always said to the boys, we are them, they are us. And when we forget about that we are serving them, that's when our problems come. So, and then obviously the ball with the ETFG on it, that's every try for God. And then again, TNT, and our bomb squad this year, that bomb at the top there, we had our reserve, our bench that came off this year and made a difference every single time. So, yeah, so it's just something the boys don't know. We usually do the change room for them before inter schools, and then they walk in there. And yeah, we've got a guy, Eugene, from PSA Science that does everything for us this year. And this guy's just so ridiculously amazing with his mindset. And I sort of go to him and say, I have this idea. And then he says, Sean, leave it with me. And then like a week later, this guy is just amazing with what he puts into the change room. So we try and make it special for the boys, and they take something away from that as well. Just that visual reminder.
No, thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that as well with the audience. Really do appreciate it, and that just gave me goosebumps as well. You know, we are them and they are us. You know, that's brilliant. Continue with the unbelievable work. Looking forward to catching up soon in South Africa. You know, looking to catch up with the boys, and I'll be definitely getting in my fair share of photos with the new talent. And yeah, it's just unbelievable stuff. Thanks for joining me today. And I know I've said it earlier in the past, much and many thanks to everybody at Paarl Boys High. And my apologies to all the Paarl Gymnasium listeners. We're just about celebrating the journey of Sean and just talking about life and rugby in general. So I do respect Paarl Gymnasium as well. And because what that brings, it helps together these two schools create something unbelievable. So, you know, I've been on the receiving side a few times from John de Villiers and Skalkberger, the Springbok team, when we lose into schools. But Sean, thanks. I wish you all of the best for the new season, and thanks for taking the time to join us. Thank you. All right.
Yeah, and thanks so much for you. And just to end off from our side, I just wanted to say, you know, you mentioned your journey at the moment where you are and you want to get back into the pro setup. Also, just trust that this is your page at the moment and God's written something special in there. So your time at the moment is to serve other people and help them. So thank you also for that through chatting and your wisdom as well. Always when you come here, we enjoy that. And thank you for serving Paarl Boys High. And thank you for the opportunity. It's great for me to share. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for those words. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. Ciao, ciao. Okay, bye.
Cool.